The podcast is ending? What's next for Money Talk with Skyler Fleming? Find out in today's episode. You know, we don't talk about money enough. It's a topic that gets ignored for some reason, even though it plays a role in everyone's day-to-day life. This issue is what brought Money Talk with Skyler Fleming to reality. I know you're probably busy and don't have time to research and learn about all the things that go into personal finance, but that's where this podcast, Money Talk with Skyler Fleming, comes into play. I'm your host, Skyler Fleming. I'm here to do the research and learn about all the things that go into personal finance. The goal is to simply get us talking about money, so let's get talking. Welcome to today's episode of Money Talk with Skyler Fleming. Today's episode is going to be a short one. I'll talk about it more shortly, but this is the last episode of the podcast for the foreseeable future. That doesn't mean I'm not going to be creating great personal finance content, but it is going to be a little bit different going forward. The money talking points for today's episode are, what's one thing that you've learned from the podcast? With the money talking points in mind, let's get right into today's episode. Thank you to everyone who's listened to this podcast over the last 2 years. It wasn't easy to decide to end the podcast. Whether I was going to or not is something that I've been contemplating for the last few weeks. Just ask my wife. It's weighed on me heavily. It's something that I've enjoyed doing a lot. It's taken me a month or two to fully decide what I wanted to do. And especially over the last few weeks, I've been thinking about it constantly. But I've finally made my decision. So I'm excited to talk about what's next. So why are these changes happening? What's happening to the podcast? I felt like it's time to move on from the podcast for a little while now. I've spent the last 2+ years doing it, and I've had a great time doing it, but I'm excited to continue to grow and learn more. There's other avenues that I want to pursue and things that I want to commit more time towards than producing the podcast week in and week out. Now, it has been absolutely fantastic to produce the podcast. It's been a ton of fun. I've learned a lot in this time, but I've felt that it's time to move on. So I'm excited for what's upcoming. Money Talk with Skyler Fleming isn't going away. Let's recap really quickly some of the great things that this podcast has been able to do. And it's really been exciting for me. I've had so much fun creating this podcast, and I've been able to talk to some awesome people in the personal finance realm. I've been a guest on Stacking Benjamins, which was fantastic and a fun conversation. I've been privileged to have Matt and Joel from How to Money on my podcast and talk to them about personal finance. They've had over 700 episodes, and Stacking Benjamins has, I think, well into the 1,000+ episodes. So make sure you go check out those two podcasts if you're looking for something to listen to if you're not already listening to those podcasts. But I've had a ton of fun learning about different financial topics, whether it was questions that were left on social media, emails that you sent me, or just general topics that I wanted to learn more about. It was a ton of fun creating content around personal finance for this podcast. So I had a ton of fun doing that, and I look forward to continuing to do that. But let's talk about what changes are coming to Money Talk with Skyler Fleming next. What is next? Well, I'm going to take the rest of the year off. I know by the time you're listening to this podcast episode, that's not a long time, but I'm going to take the time to relax and not worry too much about Money Talk with Skyler Fleming and figure out what I'm going to do next. And I'm excited for what's coming next because I think it's going to be centered a lot around YouTube, as well as some potential changes coming to my website in 2024. So make sure you check out the website, whether you want to subscribe to my email newsletter or subscribe on YouTube. Both would be greatly appreciated. But of course, if you have any questions, you can always email me. My email and all the links that I've mentioned today will be in the show notes. I'm excited to create some content specifically for YouTube. It's something that I've wanted to get into a little bit more and learn a little bit more, and I'm excited to devote more of my time specifically to YouTube. Of course, all the podcast episodes are available on YouTube, so if you go and subscribe over there, you can listen to each and every episode. And the podcast that you're listening to and wherever you listen to it on isn't going anywhere. It's still going to be available if you want to go back and listen to old episodes. It's just not going to be receiving any new episodes for the foreseeable future. So again, thank you to everyone who's listened over the last 2.5 years to Money Talk with Skyler Fleming. It's been a fun time creating the podcast. I've learned a lot. I've had a lot of great money talks with a lot of great guests. So thank you to everyone who's came on the show, who's listened to the show, and who's shared the show with friends and had a money talk from one of my podcast episodes. It's been a ton of fun, but I'm excited for the future, and I'm excited to start doing more on YouTube. So please head over to skylerfleming.com or youtube.com/moneytalk with Skyler Fleming and subscribe on there, or subscribe to my email newsletter via my website. I'd love to stay in touch. If you have any questions, or you want to give me any feedback about the podcast, or you want me to cover something in a YouTube video, please send me an email. My email is moneytalk@skylerfleming.com, and you can always find that in the show notes, of course. But I'm looking forward to this change. It's going to be exciting. Thank you for listening to Money Talk with Skyler Fleming over the last 2+ years. I'm your host, Skyler Fleming. Have a great week.